Veterans and Human Services Committee to order at 6:45. We have a great show for you tonight. We got Mr. Jerry Lynch for Veterans Grave Officer.
Good evening, members of the City Council. The reason I was asked to be here was what are my expectations of the grave services. Every veteran will be remembered. No matter how far, how deep, we have to search. Every Attleboro resident will be recognized and be given proper services. Now, if there's any questions you have of me?
I would like to say, Jerry, I can't think of a person I'd be more honored to have handle this, and with Joanne too as well, and being part of this, and I think it's fantastic and great, and we've known each other for a long time, and I think you're one of the most respected men in the city, so thank you for honoring our servicemen and doing this for us. Councilors, any questions?
Well, I can only echo the respect part, because, and it's not just they respect you and Joanne, you respect the veterans and those who have passed. And that rolls along, and the rest of the city gets the message. If they never got it before, they're getting it. And I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
Councilor Tavares.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jerry, for your service, the service of all the veterans here in the city, and all that you do, as you mentioned, to remember them. It's easy for us to sit here and move on with our lives one day after another, but it's because of the sacrifice of so many people in this city who have served that has enabled us to live in peace, to live in a community that we can be proud of our veterans. So thank you.
Yeah, just one more thing.
Sure, yes, sir.
So the thought just hit me how important it is when I go home to my town that I grew up in Essex, Connecticut, near the shoreline. And the first place I go is always to the cemetery to honor my mother and my father, who was in the Marines in World War II. And to know that they're taking care of the grave while I'm not there. And that's part of what you're doing.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Councilor Boy, Vice President Dolan next.
Thank you, Counselor. I just want to thank you for your service, and I think this is such an important role in the city, probably one of the most overlooked roles, and I think you're the perfect fit for it. Couldn't draw anyone up better in my mind. So thank you. The one comment I'll make simply is I hope that at some point we can get on board with Wraiths Across America or a similar concept. I mentioned it to the Veterans Office back in December, but definitely something I'd love to see in Attleboro. I understand there's costs to that, but again, thank you, and look forward to seeing you in this position.
Vice President Dolan.
I won't be long, but Jerry, you know everybody loves you and respects you and cares deeply for you because you care deeply for everybody. And like Councilor Angel said, I can't think of anybody better to be in this position. Thank you.
If I may, this is my last year as commander of the VFW, so that will give me an opportunity to work more closely with Joanne on this. And I also want to say thank you to the council for several of our ceremonies that you come to. That's so very important to us, the veterans. So if you would, if you have the time, we're going to be doing the flags in the cemeteries in May and the flags on the common. There are 7,000 flags we'll be putting on the common. Plus we do every cemetery in Attleboro with the help of many organizations around the city. And part of that is work that you guys have done for me to help me meet these other organizations and bring them aboard. So for that, I salute you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jerry.
Megan. Megan Kerr is for Board of Park Commissioners.
I'm Megan Kerr. I live at 47 Green Drive. I applied for this position because I'm relatively new to the area. I came in 2017. I lived in Boston for 10 plus years, but I grew up in Rhode Island, and my dad was a quahogger, very into the environment, very into the natural resources that we had growing up because it affected his livelihood. And coming here, and the pandemic hit, I lived right next to Highland Park, so that was a whole park that was just like, or the country club at that point. And I kept thinking to myself, oh, I really hope that this park is going to be bought by the city and we can use it. And every day during the pandemic, I went with my husband, my dog that I adopted, and went to Capron Park. And it became part of my community. I got to meet a lot of people going to the park, and especially having Highland right there, I get to see the events that are happening there. And my family comes from a long line of public service. My sister is on the exec board of the Police Action Athletic League in Warwick, Rhode Island. So seeing her be part of that is like, I want to give back to the community and participate in this after I found out that Delia was stepping down in this position. And it would be really great to have my son be raised in this environment where he gets to see his mom participate in the local community, and hopefully one day kind of get him thinking about that. Because when I was young, I wanted to get my master's in public administration. I wanted to work for local government. Things changed, and I ended up in the library archives world. But I thought this would be a really great opportunity for me to get involved at this stage in my life and kind of give back, knowing how much of the influence parks have had on me growing up and the environment, especially with my dad's career.
Well, thank you, Megan. Appreciate it very much. I think, obviously, I think you're pretty well suited for it. And the fact that you adopted a dog, that does it for me. So
He's not the best dog, but we love him.
Absolutely. That's great. Any questions, comments, concerns, councilors?
Well, I appreciate your interest and desire to help out with the parks very much. Was there anything about our park system that surprised you?
Well, the zoo. I had no idea that was city-owned. A municipal zoo is new to me. So that is really interesting to me, walking through there every day, knowing it's under the leadership of the city to take care of it. But I think that I've tried to hit up as many of the places that, like this little small places that they have on the map. I forgot what this. There's like by the river. There's like a little stream. We tried to take my dog to the different areas, so it's kind of just learning about the area, and it's so new to me, especially with the mill town and hearing all the different stories about the area. So nothing really surprising, but really excited to learn more and explore. And my dog has given me that opportunity to get out and force myself to.
Well, our city is really proud of our parks, and we'll be proud of the work you do to help us. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions, comments? All right, great. Well, thanks, Megan. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Mr. Johnson. Leah has already been approved on the council and for the, just wanted to have him come up and say hi.
Hi. How you doing, everybody?
Name, address, and
Leo Johnson, 45 Phillips Street.
there you go.
That's it?
That's it. Just, I know where another, just like Jerry Lynch, Leo's another gentleman, as everybody knows. He's given his life to the city and done so many for everything. I mean, I've known Leo from baseball and sports and just being there, answering questions, doing everything for everybody, and then doing an incredible job of the Emmett Locken St. Patty's Memorial Fund and everything, and which was an incredible turnout and just giving back to the city over and over and over again.
Well, it's an honor to be able to serve the residents of Attleboro in any capacity, and I appreciate the opportunity. As a member of the Police Commission, as a member of the Recreation Commission, and, whatever else, it's a labor of love, and I appreciate the chance, so thank you all.
All right. Leo did say he's not taking any questions or anything.
No. It's a very important question. Mr. Johnson, thank you. Nice to meet you for the first time. What is your plan to keep Peter Blair in line on the police commission?
What is my plan?
Order that?
No, I'm kidding, of course.
That's why they have handcuffs and duct tape.
It's a great commission you're joining with former Councilor Duff White and, of course, former Councilor Peter Blair.
I look
So,
forward to it.
Yeah, you guys will do a lot of great work.
Yeah, we have
Got a big legacy and big shoes to fill on that.
We have a great chief, he does a great job. We have a great group of officers over there. I know many of them through the years that I've worked over there, so
Yep.
I'm looking forward to it. Yep.
They're lucky to have you in their corner.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. Any other questions or comments? All right, great,
All right,
Leo. Thank you very
all.
much.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye, pal.
All right, okay, here we go. All right, for the docket of April 2nd, 2024, I entertain a motion to approve the appointment of Jerry Lynch, 172 Richardson Ave, to serve as a Veterans Grave Officer for a term of 1 year, term to expire February 2025.
Second.
Thank you, Council Tavares. Obviously, we just heard from Jerry, and I'm sure this is, I know this is a great fit. And any questions? All right, seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes 3-0. All right, for the docket of April 2nd, 2024, I entertain a motion to approve the appointment of Megan Kerr, 47 Green Street, to fill an unexpired term of the Board of Park Commission's term to expire February 2025.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Tavares. Again, we just heard from Megan, and I think she's going to be a really good fit. This is going to work out pretty well, and I think she's going to bring a lot of excitement, and looking forward to helping out on the Board of Park Commissioners. Any questions? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes 3-0. That's all for Personnel, Veterans, and Human Services Committee. A call for an adjournment at 6:56.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Tavares. We are adjourned. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. We are adjourned.
Thank you. I call the Finance Committee to order at 6:57 PM. And I apologize for attending remotely. First item, I'd like to thank all the participants that joined us in the capital improvement tours 2 weekends ago. I think those tours were very helpful, and I'd like to provide a quick update to everybody, not just the folks on the Finance Committee. The next steps for everyone that I'd like to vote this out in 2 weeks, which will be on the 9th. So in 2 weeks, what I'd like from everybody is a list of their priorities for items on the capital improvement plan. So in 2 weeks, if everyone can have sort of a list of their priorities to bring with them. Also between now and then, I'll send out a draft capital improvement message from the council that we'll review in 2 weeks' time. And then hopefully we can review that, approve the capital improvement plan on the 9th, and then approve the overall plan in front of the whole council on the 16th. One of the things that was really apparent was with water and wastewater, there's some major projects that are coming down the pike. And so in talking to Mason, he suggested that he come before us and talk about some of the things that him and the administration and the water and wastewater superintendent are doing to proactively prepare for those large projects. So I looked at it, and before I knew that I would not be in town today, I encouraged him. We prepared for Mike Maker from New Gen to join us. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mason and the guests to come before us and talk a little bit about water rates and what they're doing to prepare for some of these big capital improvement projects that are coming before us.
Good evening, Councilor. Good evening, Councilors. Thank you for bringing us before you tonight, Councilor Kobus. I'm just going to quickly pass out the presentation that our rate study consultant's going to walk through, just so everyone has a copy on hand.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So just for some background context, so I came on with the city as the city's budget director last May, and kind of one of the first things that was brought to my attention was a clear need for a water and wastewater rate study. So longtime members of the finance committee were sort of unaware of the city ever bringing in an outside consultant to actually to evaluate our rates and kind of formulate a strong comprehensive rate model. From my review of our existing rate structure and our calculation method, I thought the calculation was somewhat limited, doesn't really allow for us to kind of utilize it for long-term planning. And I would say the existing structure is pretty single fiscal year focused, really only accounting for budget operating expenses, current debt service, and indirect costs. So we didn't really have a comprehensive rate model that allows us to think about increasing costs, escalations, cost of future projects, and then also consider future debt scenarios. So without a comprehensive multi-year model, it's somewhat difficult to proactively plan for the future, and I think it leads to short-sighted cost savings, decisions when it comes to setting the rates, and that kind of results in, a lack of long-term system improvements and, potential efficiencies. And I think the biggest thing is that the single-year rate model leads to significant rate increases in individual years, or what we might call rate shock, without considerations for spreading rate increases out over time. So you may remember that in the mayor's FY24 enterprise budget message, she had a future challenges section. The mayor highlighted the substantial water and wastewater infrastructure needs in the coming years, starting in FY24 and 25 and beyond, and also noted that there was a plan to conduct a rate study. Reasons for bringing in an outside firm for a rate study would be making sure that the water and wastewater rates are being set appropriately and at sustainable levels by consulting with industry experts, having a robust model that allows for capital and debt planning and better predicts operation costs in ever-changing fiscal environments, ensuring we are setting rates at adequate levels to fund our significant water and wastewater infrastructure needs, many of which are necessitated by regulation or permit requirements, and are coming up over the next few years. And then having a model that can serve as a baseline for continuously evaluating the short and long-term impacts of rate and fee changes. So the city conducted a competitive request for proposal process for a water and wastewater rate study, and we received proposals in October. The proposals were evaluated by an evaluation committee consisting of myself, Water Superintendent Courtney Allen, and Wastewater Superintendent Tom Hayes. And in accordance with the RFP, the contract was awarded to the most advantageous proposer on the basis of quality and of the expertise of the selected consultant and cost. So we ultimately awarded the contract to NewGen Strategies and Solutions, and we've been working with NewGen since the end of November to develop a comprehensive rate model for the 25 budget and beyond. So NewGen's project manager, Mike Maker, has actually joined us here tonight all the way from Maryland. Mike is originally from Massachusetts, but he's the deputy director of NewGen's water practice based out of Annapolis, Maryland. He's managed numerous management financial studies for municipal water, sewer, solid waste, and stormwater utilities. He's an active member of the American Water Works Association's AWWA Workforce Strategies Committee. He's a co-author of the latest edition of AWWA's Manual M29, Capital Financing, and Manual M5, Water Utility Management. And him and his team have combined decades of experience, have conducted rate and fee studies for dozens of municipalities in the Northeast U.S., including municipalities in Massachusetts. Throughout the last few months, the city has worked directly with his team to review our existing rate structure and build a comprehensive model that both maps our existing structure, but also gives us options for changes and improvements moving forward. Mike's here tonight to explain some initial findings of the study. So just to be clear, the numbers discussed here tonight are preliminary. They are subject to change. We have an updated CIP before us now that is incorporated into the model. We have some updated debt service numbers for 25 because we just went out for a borrowing, so we have changes in debt service that are incorporated. Those are accurate numbers. And then we have some preliminary budget numbers from the superintendent's proposed budgets. Again, those aren't final numbers. Those are their requests, and there's obviously administrative decisions around those budgets. But we think it's important to be transparent, have this discussion early on, and try to give you a picture where we think we are headed. So the final recommended rates will come down with the 25 proposed budget as has been done in the past. But we think it's important, again, to just kind of have an opportunity for the council to ask questions of the outside rate consultant, get an idea of where we're headed, and be able to ask questions in the background for, to the superintendents about their projects, as well as to myself. And then, of course, the opportunity tonight to talk to the consultant. And so if you have any questions, tonight we'll try to answer them. If you have follow-up questions, you can always reach out to us. But with that, I just want to turn it over to Mike Maker.
Thank you, Mason.
The clicker.
Good evening. I was born and raised in Lynn, so take that for what it's worth. Yeah. Great. So I just have a brief presentation. If you have questions along the way, just feel free to stop me. Jumping right in. So the guiding principles of the study and objective. So the water and sewer enterprise funds should be financially self-supporting. As you know, they're user-funded, so as enterprise funds, they shouldn't be subsidized through the general fund, through property taxes or anything like that. And ideally, water shouldn't borrow from sewer or vice versa. Now, if there's services that they receive from the general fund, like the indirect expenses, they certainly should pay for those things, HR, finance, IT, things like that. Utilities should maintain reserves, provide for contingencies, unplanned expenses. We give recommendation for an operating balance reserve, kind of a day's cash on hand, kind of a rainy day fund. And then water and sewer rates should be kept as low as possible over time. And we italicize over time here because you can defer maintenance, not invest in your system, and have really low rates. But then at some point you're going to have a really large main break in a downtown area or something like that. It's going to be catastrophic and very expensive. So that's why we try to set a financial plan for the long term so that we can try to keep those rates fairly steady. So our objective is to ensure.
If I can, before we proceed too far, if I can interrupt, if anyone has questions, President Delisio, would you mind sort of watching for people raising their hand, just because I can't see if somebody's raising their hand? Would you mind sort of managing that for me, just where I'm remote?
Nope, not at all.
Okay, thank you. And I apologize for interrupting. I'm sorry there.
No, I appreciate that.
Just what he does.
Yeah, I'll be ready.
Sorry.
So our objective is to ensure rates are stable through sound financial management and system maintenance, and we do that by reviewing the funds and then preparing a long-term financial plan. So what are some of the things that affect rates and charges for water and sewer? So obviously operating and maintenance expenses. This is your day-to-day expenses, your salaries, your materials, your benefits. In the model, so Mason talked about having a model. We built an Excel model, which is a series of linked schedules. And it's given to the city as property of yours. We'll train you on how to use it. Ideally Mason and probably Courtney and Tom. And kind of the first assumption schedule is looking at things like inflation, growth factors, things like that. So in terms of inflationary factors, after discussion with the city, we're looking at about 5 to 7% per year for labor expenses, each year increasing, 7.5% for healthcare. A lot of times we're seeing really high premiums there. And then for everything else, we've either just using the historical CPI, which has been about 3% or so the past 20 years. I know last year was a lot higher, but things are starting to come back down. And then some things they're kind of the same increase, or the same expense every year, so they're just 0% for some others. The biggest driver is probably going to be your CIP, and I know speaking with Courtney and Tom, you've seen kind of some of the things that are coming down the pike. This is the investment in your treatment, your distribution, your collection system. So a lot of it's buried infrastructure, it goes unseen. A lot of people don't realize what kind of investment is actually under the ground there, other than the treatment plants and pumping stations. But a lot of that is aging, especially in the Northeast, and there's a lot of regulatory requirements from the EPA, DEP, and things like that. Debt service, so you have existing debt service that you obviously need to pay to keep up with your bond ratings and coverage and things like that. And then on top of that is any future debt service, so any capital projects, that we're planning on actually funding for the future, debt service. We have a 25-year maturity assumption there. And then for that one particular project, that the water treatment plant project of $35 million, hopefully we're getting a low interest loan for that, 2%, and hopefully some loan forgiveness. And then for everything else, we're going with around 4 to 4.5% for interest. Yes.
Council Fowler?
Where does the loan forgiveness come from? You mentioned there might be some loan forgiveness.
I think it's a state loan, right? So it's they call it an SRF, a revolving fund.
So specifically with the $35 million PFAS water treatment plant project, that's actually, I just got an email about 10 minutes ago that was included in the final IUP for the state revolving fund. So there's an opportunity for, what's unclear right now is the percentage of the project that will be eligible for 0% financing, as well as potential loan forgiveness. Now there is some loan forgiveness that we do anticipate, but we don't have final numbers on that. We don't know which portion of the project is. So for the purpose of the model, we had to build in, some percentage of interest to say, hey, there's administrative costs. Some portion of the project may not be 0% financed. And then right now, because it's unclear on the amount of loan forgiveness, we built in the full cost of the project. So those are some of the things that can improve later. So that's sort of some of the nuance within the model. But for planning purposes, we need to have some sort of assumptions built in there.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're hoping we're bringing you the most conservative kind of worst case of what increases might need to be if you've read ahead. And then hopefully with some things like that, it'll look a little rosier. Again, to be conservative for customer changes and kind of water and sewer usage, we're anticipating you're fairly built out and we're not really adding any additional customers or usage. In fact, some places across the country we're seeing declining usage, so you find things like smaller household sizes or folks are conserving more or low flow fixtures, things like that. So we're actually seeing some places actually seeing declining usage over time. So that's why it's kind of important to get as much as we can revenue stability in terms of fixed charges as well as variable charges. Same thing, be conservative on miscellaneous revenue. So you have some other things other than rates and charges, things like interest, penalties, some betterment assessments, things like that. We're just assuming right now none of that is going to grow. You're still going to have those miscellaneous revenues, but they're just going to stay at what they are. And once you do realize that, that should help. And then the reserve target I mentioned, so typically you tie the reserve target to operating expenses. So if we set a cash balance of 90 days, that's 25% of the year, 25% of the expenses. So essentially it says if you receive no more revenue in the door today, you'd be able to operate for another 90 days. So again, I'd say that's the bare minimum of what you need to do. Some places have a year's worth of cash, some places have more, some have big utilities. And a lot of that's going to be rating agencies. If you had to go to the bond market and have a rating, if you want to say AAA rated or something like that, they would look at like medians of those who are AAA rated, they have 400 days of cash. They won't say you have to have 400 days, but they'll say that's what typical they have. We don't have, I think, those requirements, but at least establishing something to get going is, we would recommend at least 90 days. So what we call the revenue requirement, it's just a fancy word for the costs. It's just the revenue required to be collected. And these are kind of the building blocks. So obviously you need to cover your operating expenses. Regardless of how much water you sell or how much people are buying, you still have salaries to pay and benefits, materials, things like that. Really the only thing that's variable is probably electricity and chemicals. Everything else is pretty much fixed. So after that, with the indirect costs, you may have seen that in some of the budgetary documents before. That's again tied to a percentage of the operating costs. And I believe you have a cost allocation study done every so often to determine those. Debt service, so as you talked about in your current debt service, so this is principal and interest payments you're already obligated for, so things you've already have said you're going to be paying back. Cash funded capital projects, so here it's going to be raised through rates or through retained earnings. So when we say cash fund, it's really, we're either increasing rates to collect the monies for these capital projects or using retained earnings. And these are kind of, if the projects happen in a specific year, you need to pay for it in that year. Whereas it's debt funded, we amortize it and then you can pay for it over time. And so that's the next one, new debt service. So we have current debt service, which is things you're currently paying for, principal and interest. New debt is new capital that we're then going to determine the amortization for. You kind of add those two together and that's your total debt picture. So we add all that up, that's our revenue requirement. We would less out any of those miscellaneous revenues, and that's where we have our net revenue requirement. So now let's look at some actual graphical representation of the numbers here for those categories. So we're starting with our base year, fiscal year 2024, which we're in right now, and then the next 5 fiscal years, so 25 starting July 1st. You can see the blue stacks, that's your O&M expenses, your operating expenses, salaries, benefits. That little slight sliver of red there, that's the indirect cost based on those operating expenses paid to the general fund. The green is current debt service. We then have the purple, which is the cash funded projects. You can see this is water, by the way, I'm sorry. This is water, then I'll show you sewer. There's the purple, the cash funded cap projects, there's some there in 2025 and 2026. And then you can see how the next big stack is the new debt service, so that's capital projects that are planning on being debt funded, and that's the actual amortization payments for those. So we have it in the model where whenever the project year is, so if the project's in 2025, the payment starts the next year. So we don't see any new debt service starting until 26, 27, 29. And then you'll see these two lines. So there's one red line going across horizontally. That's how much revenue you're bringing in now with what rates are bringing in. So if you look, since 2024 is a budgetary year, we have it so it's exactly the same, the revenues and expenses there. But then the next year, you can see you're not even covering your current debt service. I'm sorry, yeah, you're just covering operating expenses, indirect costs. I'm looking at 2025 here. And you can see you're just covering about half your current debt service. Same thing here, and then once we introduce new debt service from capital projects, this is clearly not sustainable. This line is our proposed revenue increases in order to cover this 5-year plan. And our goal is by the end of the 5th year, 2029, we have met that 90 days cash balance. So we're trying to not put it all on the backs of the customers. We're using some cash balance, and we're not meeting it exactly in the 1st year, but over time, we're making it so our goal is to meet that cash balance by the 5th year. And you'll see the note at the bottom, that proposed revenue line, that sloping up green line, that reflects a 21% increase in revenue in 25, again in 26, and again in 27, and then hopefully getting to some sort of inflationary increases each year. We'd recommend you do something each year, some sort of inflationary to keep up with your costs, but we're just not there yet. So it needs to be some sort of ramp up to get there first, and then hopefully we can be more steady. And it also assumes, apparently with the way you collect revenue, you usually collect 1/4 of old revenue and then 3/4 of new revenue. So you're not getting a full year of the new revenue, but it's based on 1/4 and then 3/4.
Mike, can you take a question from Vice President Dolan?
Sure.
Just a quick question. The 21% increase from 25 to 27, is that per year?
It is per year, yeah.
Thank you.
And then here's the cash balance for water. So I kept it on the same scale, so it looks like it's really small, but they're both in that $18 million scale. So you have it looks like about $1.5 million or so right now in terms of kind of free cash flow. So this is things that are not reserved, for payroll, anything like that. This is money really that's available to hold down the rate increase if we're able to. And that red line is the 90-day target. So that increases as O&M expenses increase. It's always based on 25% of that. And so our goal is to really make sure that blue line, the blue column is higher than the red line, and that means you're meeting that 90-day cash. So that's kind of the plan of why we chose those percentages in the last slide.
Mike, can Councilor Tavares ask a question?
Sorry, to go back to the last slide.
Yes.
Just a quick question. What represents the significant increase in the new debt service from 27, 28, 20? I saw there's a small portion in 26, but.
Yeah, these are probably a great question for Courtney, because this is the water CIP, which there's a lot of major projects in there. I don't know if you want to detail any of those, or we just. Yeah.
Sorry if I'm jumping in.
No. And a lot of it's aging infrastructure, a lot of it's mandatory, compliance requirements, but if you want to get details.
Sure. For FY25, Council voted earlier this year, or late last year actually, to fund the design of the temporary treatment facility at Wading River, as well as construction. The other big one that's going to be hitting next year is the ozone system, which is in design right now and will be in construction later this year. When you look a little bit later, the big one that's actually going to hit likely in 26 is the start of the permanent plant at Wading River. Again, that's the $35 million project that we're not 100% sure on the interest rate or the loan forgiveness amount. So those are the big ones right now. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, the model that you're looking at here includes every project that's spec'd out in the CIP. So your other projects that would be included in there, right now, proposed to start in *25, there's a couple dam rehabs or removals at both Manchester and Crocker Pond, both for '25. The actual construction's taking place in '26. We have a SCADA assessment proposed. The SCADA system at the plant is back to 2014. It's still in good shape. It's hitting age, so we're having it looked at. So there is potential extra cost for an eventual SCADA upgrade at the plant that right now is unknown on the cost without having it looked at. And actually, my other mandates are further out than the model. But just these projects right here, they're all mandated. They either are mandated by DEP, DCR, or they're just absolutely necessary to run the plant.
The other thing I will say about debt funding, obviously it lowers how much you need each year in terms of the increase. There's also this term we use called intergenerational equity. So these projects are long-lived assets. They go several decades. And so it doesn't make sense to put it all on the backs of your current customers, because as you add customers, which there will be some customers added, they're also receiving benefit from those projects. So it makes sense to kind of, draw out those costs as well. Now let's turn to sewer. And again, using that same scale, the blue being the O&M expenses, red indirect, green current debt service, cash flow projects, new debt service. So currently, that red line again, balanced budget in '24, covering your O&M, covering your indirect costs in '25, but not covering your entire current debt service. And I will add that green current debt service, that does include some newly amortized projects that you've added this year. So it's not entirely all past debt. There's some current debt. And then you can see not covering new capital, not covering new debt service. So in this case for sewer, the green line sloping up would be a 9.5% each year for 3 years, and then 3%. So. And then the same thing with their cash balance. Looks like they have slightly more than $1.5 million right now. You would use some of that in '25 and '26, because essentially any time on here, with this column is higher than the line, that's technically a shortfall. You need to use some retained earnings. And anytime there's a little gap here, that's a surplus. So you can then build up your retained earnings again, which then hopefully gets us to that 90 days. So here we're using some cash, which is helping the customer. We're not putting all in an increase. We're actually using some of our retained earnings, but then we're making sure we meet that 90 days. So your current rate structure is fairly simple. You have a quarterly minimum charge. So regardless of how much water you use, you pay $29.95 per quarter for your water customer, and then $47.34 for sewer. And then if you use anything, that's for 500 cubic feet. So if you use above 500 cubic feet, you then pay these per 100 cubic feet charges. And sewer is based on 90%, so it's 450 cubic feet as opposed to 500. To offset, I think, how much is for irrigation that's not going to go in your sewer system. So you give them a little buffer, a cushion there. And then some industrial customers, those who are industrial customers, they pay an additional 90-cent surcharge. It is not tied to rates. It's just a flat 90 cents. And I think it's been that way for years. So I think one of our recommendations is to, I think at one time it was supposed to be 10% of the rate, and it's no longer that 10% because it's always stayed 90 cents as you've increased the rate. So I think the recommendation is kind of get back to that 10%. And Tom could probably provide a little more context on what that goes to. I don't even think it's covering its costs in terms of industrial pretreatment and things like that. This is a rate history. So we went back, it looks like almost 40 years. It would be nice to go back to these rates. It was $1.04 This is the sewer rate per 100 cubic feet back in, it's at 1983, and it was 73 cents for water. And then this is any time it was raised, it bumps up. So the sewer and the water, they were not raised for several years, 5 years. Then we had these big bump ups, not raised for another, 7, 8 years. And you can see kind of these odd turns they took. At one point, the water rate was actually decreased here. You can see it drops down. I'm not sure why that happened. And then sewer, you can see a huge increase here, this 4 or 5 year span. There must have been some large project that needed a large rate increase. So $1.04 40 years ago, today it is $10.52 and $5.99. And then this dotted line just shows if we were to get to today's rate from the rate 40 years ago, you would have needed a roughly 5.7% increase every year, and it kind of compounds on itself for sewer, and 5.1 for water. That would get you to currently where the rates are today. So just a little bit of context, reference, and historical. I know none of us were here when this happened, but this is kind of the long, windy journey that the rates have taken. So the projected charges and rates, again, we're just applying those percentages we showed before. So we're just taking today's rates, applying the 21% for 3 years for water, then 2 3%, and then for sewer, the 3 9.5%, and the 2 3%. And then we always say customers don't care what their rates are, they want what their bill is going to be. So here are some typical residential customers. So if you're a small customer using about 1,000 cubic feet per quarter, typical or average customer using about 2,000, and then a large residential using about 4,000. These are what their bill is today. So if we just go to the average user, if you use 2,000 cubic feet per quarter, your water bill is about 120, sewer is about 190, so 310. The new bill would be 350. That represents a $43 increase of combined water and sewer. So again, we mentioned there's 21% for water, 9.5% for sewer, but combined it's a 14% increase on the combined bill. I imagine most of your customers are water and sewer customers, so they would probably see that 14%. Yes.
Council Fowler?
What is an average user? Is this a single-family home on half an acre, or an acre, or multifamily home? What does that mean?
Yes, typically it would be, we'd have all your accounts, and we'd know they're all residential, and we just kind of look at what's the median usage. So we'd know every single usage for every single account. We didn't get into actually what their lot size looked like or anything like that. I don't even know if the billing system has that, but it would more just the average usage, So some use way more than that. Some use, they're not going to use too much less than that because it's not a great amount of usage.
The median usage, not the average.
This one might be an average. The median, yeah, you're right. A median would be exactly where it falls in, right? 50% below, 50% above. This is maybe taking all the usage and dividing by the bill, so it's an average. Yeah. For residential, so there's some really large commercial, right, that below way past that 2,000, and then you may have some really small users who are using around the 1,000, but yeah. But again, percentage-wise, they're all coming out with the same percentage because it's all across the board. So yeah, dollars obviously are different. So our recommendations for today, and I don't think you have to take any action on today, but we would at least recommend the water and sewer rates for 2025. I'm a proponent for a long-term plan. If you could actually adopt rates for 5 years at one time, you can kind of set it and forget it, and if it meets what you need each year, then that's great. If not, you can come back and adjust it, but I understand, I think you vote each year here, so. And then I recommend that industrial surcharge, and instead of keeping it at a flat 90 cents, which hasn't kept up with as the rates increased, make it 10% of the sewer rate, so at least that increases, and there's a little more revenue there to handle some of the pre-treatment industrial costs. That 90-day operating balance, I think that's kind of a bare minimum, just in terms of setting something aside for a rainy day fund. And then obviously review rates and charges each year. So as I said, Mason's going to have the model. He can go in, replace budgeted numbers with actual numbers, kind of see where things stand, how did we do, and then you can make adjustments there. And then you really don't need a full rate study, every 3 to 4 to 5 years. And then the other thing note is You also have some miscellaneous fees. So if you evaluate some of those, any revenue you can get from miscellaneous fees is less you need from rates and charges. It's not a huge portion of your total revenue, but it certainly helps. So with that, any additional questions?
So, Mike, I have a, Council Fuller then, I have a few questions. Council Fuller.
I understand that we need a new sewer treatment plant. Does the debt liability that you describe here, how does that fit into?
Tom, question. The big sewer project is not even in that 5-year plan. It's in like year 6 or 7. And that's a big one. Yeah. There's obviously, I think there's sewer treatment plant improvements within there. But I know the one you're talking, there's a number out there. So our model goes 10 years. And so we asked for the wish list, we want all your projects, but we're only focusing on the next 5 years. So there is a project out there that is large. And Tom will probably tell you exact numbers, but not to scare you, but.
The current treatment plant went online in 1980. It's been running nonstop for going on 45 years. It was designed to meet levels of nutrient removal and whatnot that at that time were, deemed acceptable. It's no longer able to meet the levels that are required by EPA and DEP. It hasn't been for a long time, and we've done a lot with what we have to make it meet those levels, but we're at the point now we just cannot do it. In 2013, I filed for the new permit. It's been over a decade now, it's been 11 years, and we still haven't got the new permit, but we know that the new permit is going to make the permit we have now look easy. And the facility itself, the infrastructure, it's failing. It does. Once we turned it on, it never shut off. It can't shut off. So we need to rebuild this facility, and we need to add a lot more processes to meet the new nutrients removal, the more stringent metals. And to do this, it's going to require a lot more concrete being poured. We did a big upgrade in 2004. All we did is we replaced one old equipment, electrical wiring. We never touched the structures. The structures are failing. They've been, underwater, filled with water now for going on 45 years. The concrete's failing. The equipment is obsolete already. And it's going to be expensive. Nobody knows what it is because you can't design for an unknown. EPA has not given us a permit. But just looking at what other communities are facing, you're looking anywhere from $100 to $150 million to get this treatment plant to the point where it can meet the expected permits that we're going to see from EPA. And there is no money from EPA. There hasn't been any money from EPA for almost 50 years for projects like this. The treatment plant was built in 1980 with Superfund money, and that's the last time we got any real money from them. So.
Councilor LaVoy.
Thank you.
You want any more bad news?
Directed to the no changes anticipated in customers, how did we come to that conclusion? Because
Are you addressing?
whoever can answer the question, I suppose.
Yeah.
How did we come to that conclusion?
So we're being conservative there. I'm sure you have, some developments you could point to, or redevelopment, and maybe you're building things larger. If you know exactly they're going to come in the next 5-year horizon or which year, we could kind of bank on, okay, we're going to add, 200 homes here, or we're going to add, a large commercial user here, then we could kind of bake that into the growth. I think we're just trying to be conservative and say, hey, it looks like we're fairly built out.
I see Mason stepping up, but while you're coming up, Mason, I'm just talking directly to downtown off the top of my head from what I know is coming up. I can think of 975 units. If that's 2 to 3 people in a home, 2 to 3,000 people, that's 4 to 5% of the current population we're going to increase. So I'm just worried, is this not factored in when you say there's no change in population, when we're talking 4 to 5% increase in the Attleboro population? That's my question.
Yeah, absolutely. So, part of the thing with the model is we'll be able to make changes as we kind of know where we're going. One of the things we have noticed is that usage has also been declining. So, some of the growth we're going to see is also going to offset is also going to be offset by declining usage. So when I looked at, some of our old usage calculations in our old model, specifically with wastewater, I noticed our industrial assumed usage rate was way too high. And that's a number that also results in the surcharge revenues. So that being low, that results in revenues behind what was anticipated. So I think there's declining usage, and yes, so there's also potentially growth, but I think there's in some respects it's going to balance out. But as we know, new customers coming on, we talked to the planning and development to try to estimate those. We didn't have good numbers to say, hey, these are the new developments, customers that are going to be coming on that we can build in. We do know that usage is going down, so that was sort of how it was accounted for, and we'll continue to update that.
Okay. Any additional questions? Vice President
I
Dolan.
had-
Oh,
Yeah, I had one. Mr. Baker, is there a reason why we didn't include the bigger wastewater plant in the plan? I know you were only looking at the next 5 years, but I feel like something as large as that plant and that work, we should start sort of preparing for that. And that was something that I was sort of expecting to see. So when I saw the wastewater numbers only increasing by, I think it was 5% year over year, I was a little bit surprised by that. I was expecting to see the increase in us preparing for that big number coming up in
Yeah.
7, 8
And maybe because it's such an unknown, maybe the size of the project and the timing of the project, we didn't want to, just start building up funds to have this huge reserve, and then, we're not sure exactly the timing or when the costs are going to show up. But yeah, you could certainly start front-loading the rate increases to start building up funds, and maybe keep it in a separate reserve, like a capital or wastewater treatment fund, reserve, and then use that to pay off some of the debt service once it comes on. Because you're right, the rate increases are they're compounding, right? So the earlier you can do the rate increase, the better, because then you'll have that money, that much sooner. But yeah, that's certainly something as Mason, uses the model, you can look at.
Vice President.
Any other questions? Sorry.
Vice President Dolan.
Thanks. So are all these calculations, were they based on solely our needs? Like not comparable to any other cities and towns of our size? Everything was pulled from our needs and the numbers for us?
So every schedule in the model has a source document where it came from. We tie to how you do your accounting, so we're not fitting you into any, classes and titles. We use your accounting system, so it should all look familiar to the finance staff. Everything is your number. It's kind of, it's a template and a process that we've used before, but it's all based on your customized numbers. Yeah.
Can I just follow up? And so I realize that, we want predictability, right? So we want a number solid every year till 2029. How come fees weren't included in this study?
So there is
rates, but fees that
Yeah.
we charge for certain projects.
So that's one of the miscellaneous revenues I mentioned. So anything you have sales for fees. In your budgeting process, you don't include fees. You only include, I guess, rates and then a few items. So anything you do get from fees, would just be additional revenue, would help, be a bonus. Because your actuals, you do account for fees. So in the model with the revenue schedule, all the actual years have several line items. When we get to the budgetary, which is what the future years are based on, there's only a handful of revenue line items in there. But you're right, so anything you do get from that will help. And that's what I was trying to mention at the end of that recommendation. So I would recommend looking at some of those fees, seeing have they been updated in the past 5-10 years, and have they kept up with inflation and the cost of providing those service. What does it take to drive out to that customer? What does it take for the materials, things like that. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Any additional questions? I have a few. So thank you for the presentation. I think that we're all probably a little bit taken aback. We're putting a lot on the backs of the taxpayers. It is with this new school. We're talking about a new senior center. We're talking about a new potential public safety building. So all this is coming, kind of in line with that. So I guess to build off Vice President Dolan's question is, I'm curious to see how this does compare to peer communities. And these are just some thoughts as well. Because I know typically when we have these sort of presentations, we'll have that information, or we'll have insight to that. Because I think, and I appreciate trying to do it for what we're going through, because the most eye-opening chart to me was the one that showed the historical increase. And unfortunately, maybe if there was some, if our forefathers had a little more foresight and we could have had a gradual rate increase, this could be a different conversation, not the world we're in. It does lead me to something you touched on as well, is opportunity set up maybe a stabilization or a special use account, so we're not putting everything on the back of the ratepayer. I think that's something we've got to be cognizant of, and again, just my thoughts. I'm not looking for answers right now, especially where we just saw this tonight. But I would also be curious, and this could be more of a Mason question, is what sort of grants or programs that could be available. I loved the one for the PFAS. 0% is my favorite interest rate in the world. So if we can see that, that's great. What happens to the rate and the projected rate if some of these projects don't come to fruition?
Yeah, and there actually is some ARPA-funded projects in there. So those are obviously excluded from needing to be covered. So you are receiving some of that, so commend you for that. But yeah, grants are few and far between right now,
Right.
if you're seeing. Low-interest loans, if you can get stuff from the state revolving fund, usually it's a lower interest rate than going to the bond market. There's a little more administrative hoops to jump through, but sometimes
Sure.
it's worth the interest rate. But yeah, and if projects don't come to fruition, I don't see projects becoming cheaper. And the more you push them out, they become more expensive, and
Right.
we've seen supply chain issues and things like that. But that's probably more of a capital question for Courtney or Tom. But obviously, if they don't need to be done, which I don't know, for some reason they wouldn't need to be done, that obviously would help the rate.
Yeah. Okay. And then what's the thought process behind the, continuing to add an industrial surcharge? It seems like,
Yeah, so Tom will probably give some details, but I think that's for like industrial pre-treatment, so their strength of sewage is higher, and there's things they have to do to get a more domestic strength. And I think he would tell you that 90 cents isn't even covering probably what the program costs.
Sure. I just think it's important to have that out for the public to understand why. And then the last question I have is, has this presentation gone through the treasurer's office? Treasurer Gignac, has she seen that? The projected debt?
I know Deb has looked at it, but I don't know the treasurer.
So I can comment on that. So the treasurer and I have gone back and forth over the last week on some of the debt assumptions. Early on in the process, I asked her opinion on some of the interest costs that we could essentially build into the model. So Laura agreed with, for a planning tool, using the 25 years as a maturity, because there's some projects that statutorily some capital is required to be 5-year borrowings. Some, we're going to go long-term on. So we thought, we agree that 25 years at 4.5% is, sort of a fair conservative amortization. And then when it came to the $35 million PFAS project, because of some of the unknowns, we thought the 2% was fair to at least build in some of the administrative costs that we do expect.
Sure.
As well as there may be some variable interest rates depending on which portion of the project they directly relate to PFAS, and there's sort of different interest rates for different parts of the project. It may be that the whole project is 0% interest rate funded. There will be administrative costs, but it may be, so those are the kinds of things, to your point, to your previous question, if some of those projects don't come to fruition, or we get better, we end up getting better rates, or it comes in at lower prices, those are where we benefit, and ultimately we'd have additional retained earnings to be able to mitigate rate increases. And then also there's potential escalation of cost projects. Like Mike said, the longer we wait to do some of these, the more expensive they might be. So it's sort of trying to balance and have a reasonable estimation process.
No, thanks for that explanation. And a lot of these questions are questions that just sitting in the seat for as long as I have, I know the residents have. I'll tell you, I'm glad to hear that the treasurer was involved. I had no doubt she wasn't. She does a great job. I think this body over the years has come to really trust her feedback and opinions. So, a lot of hard work went into this, and I think that as I've said for years on this body, is if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And I think right now, we have some semblance of a plan. I think that as we go on, there'll be some additional questions raised. I'm really curious to look at how do we set up different saving and mitigating factors so we can start to plan a little bit more, so it doesn't quite get to that rate that I saw in fiscal '29. So thank you.
And then to also respond to some of the other questions about fees. So for water specifically, part of the permitting requires that those fees are revisited every 3 years. Doesn't necessarily require that they're increased, but revisited. So Courtney and I have actually been talking about that recently. She's got some proposals that we're reviewing right now. And then, Tom and I were recently talking about their fees, and we're working through a system right now to determine not just like the labor costs, which in the past have been kind of what we've calculated into the fees, but also potentially, equipment costs that are associated with it, as well as, maintenance of equipment. So we are looking at those fee structures, and we anticipate having some recommendations here shortly.
Vice President Dolan.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And, with me being Public Works, I talk to Tom and Courtney all the time, and we really need to revisit the fee structure, because especially with what we just saw tonight, there's no reason for any resident in this city to be supplementing any other project that doesn't benefit the city. So we need to be fair. We need to be fair in our fees and what we charge and what our people, their time and their equipment and everything is worth, so that our residents do not have to subsidize any projects that don't have anything to do with the city and what they would benefit from. So I look forward to those results.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Perfect.
Councilor Copas, there are no further questions.
And Mason, before you take off, I don't think we have any more questions, is that correct?
Correct.
Any more questions, President Delizio? No? For everyone on the council, we talked about capital improvements, voting it out of committee on the 9th, and then hopefully before the full council on the 16th is sort of the rough goal. But the other thing I wanted to mention is that as of right now, the plan is to receive the budget on April 23rd. And then I wanted to mention to everybody that I'd like to hold one of the first rounds of budget hearings on April 30th, which is it's a fifth Tuesday, so we don't normally have council on that day, but I'd like to utilize that day for at least some of our budget hearings, so wanted to let everybody know that that's just to kind of mentally prepare for that. So Mason, is the budget still planned? Are you still preparing for the 23rd?
Yeah, so the anticipated date for the budget to come down is the 23rd. That is a committee night, so likely on the next communication, on the April 2nd communication, we'll send down a request to hopefully have a special meeting that night. That's sort of the anticipated. Part of the reason it's the 23rd and not the prior Tuesday, which is a full meeting, is open enrollment is not going to end until April 17th. So some of those, obviously, health insurance is a big cost factor for the budget, so we won't have those final numbers until that week.
Okay, outstanding. Thank you, Mason. And I appreciate you joining us for this, and Courtney and Tom and Mr. Maker, thank you for joining, and I apologize I couldn't be there in person. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and so from the docket of April 2nd, 2024, I entertain a motion to approve the vote and authorize the following. 1, rescind vote number 6 and vote number 7 taken on December 5th, 2023. 2, accept the $2,387,972.13 balance of the city's Bristol County ARPA allocation in the form of a grant pursuant to the terms and conditions in the grant agreement for the Bishop Street water main replacement construction between the city and the Bristol County ARPA program. 3, authorize the reallocation of any unused funds from the wastewater equipment project and the Lindsay Street Water Main Replacement Project to be put toward the Bishop Street Water Main Replacement Project pursuant to the terms and conditions in the grant application for the Bishop Street Water Main Replacement construction.
Second.
Motion is in order. And I asked Courtney, since she was here, to come forward and talk about, but before you do, this is moving a little bit of money around. It's rescinding two votes that we had back in December, where we allocated roughly $2.38 million to the Lindsay Street Water Main project. And this was because we anticipated construction costs to be more, we allocated this ARPA money over to that water main project, the Lindsay Street Water Main project, and then sent it out for bids. Prior to that, we had already authorized 4.3 million, had already been authorized a long time ago, but with anticipated increases in construction costs, we transferred over an additional 2.38 million. Now that once we sent it out for bid, those bids came in a lot lower than anticipated. The bid actually came in at, what was it, roughly $3.5 million. And I laughed when Mr. Baker said that I don't see projects becoming cheaper. In this one instance, it actually did. But so as a result, we'd like to rescind the vote from December because the funds that we approved, the ARPA funds that we approved from the Bristol County funds already, when we approved the 4.3 million, are sufficient to cover the 3.5 million that the bids came in for construction. So we're good there, and then the request is to reallocate that 2.38 million to the Bishop Street Water Main construction project, so that we can use those ARPA funds to get that project done as well. And we're sort of in a time crunch to utilize these ARPA funds and get them under contract, so that's why that's what we're doing here. And then I asked Courtney to come briefly and talk for just 2 or 3 minutes about the Lindsay Street project, if you could, Courtney.
Hi again. Lindsay Street, again, like Councilor Cobus said, the bids came in surprisingly low, which was good. Highly recommended contractor. A lot of it came into some amendments to the temporary bypass piping plan, and that this contractor tends to do their own bypass piping, so that's a huge, huge cost savings. The contract with the contractor is currently up at City Hall. It should be signed, I would guess, in the next week or so. At that point, we'll start our pre-construction meetings, but what we're looking at right now is a potential start date from mid-April to early May. It's a long project. It's almost 2 miles of main. We're going from Pleasant Street all the way up to the North Attleboro line. So it is a long construction timeline. Expected completion date for the water main in the ground and the temporary trench paving to be done is right around Christmas. Excuse me. Lindsay Street's narrow, Lindsay Street is curvy, so there is going to be a lot of either one lane at a time or one direction, or at certain points there's about, I believe it's 3 places during the length of the project that the main actually physically crosses the road or comes across the center line. So there will be some closures, and again, once we do pre-construction, I'll have a better idea of when. I actually talked to Councilor Cobus last weekend on our site visit, and earlier today, there will be notifications going up on the website so that we can get the news out there a little bit better. I believe it's scheduled for Thursday morning, just as the information's going to be coming. And I'll try to keep that updated about once a week as the schedule goes, because we all know construction schedules change, day to day. That's what we have for Lindsay Street.
Perfect. Outstanding. Thank you. Any questions for Courtney?
Doesn't seem to be, Todd.
Anything? And I think it's really important just where there will be closures. Councilor Angelo.
Could I just ask about just a brief update on Bishop Street?
Councilor Kovic's committee meeting.
Could he, I just wanted to just ask Connie if she just gives a little brief update on like the plan when Bishop Street might get going.
Sure. Go ahead, Courtney.
Sure. We actually expect bid sets to be ready in, I believe it's next week. It will be out to bid and awarded, and basically all the money put aside for June. Fingers crossed, motivated contractor, that will be following the same timeline as Lindsay Street with a later start date. If we run into the fall, there is extra time to spend the money there, depending on schedule, but we'll have a better idea once it's bid.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And the bottom line is traffic on Lindsay will be challenging throughout the year, and residents should watch the city's Facebook page, the city's website, and for updates, and we'll try to be as transparent and communicate as often as possible for updates. But we expect it to be challenging.
One of the things we also included, and this was actually in the bid for the contractor, is that we have the light up signs that we use for the water department, is that they have to place them at either end of the job site and keep updated there for detours as well.
Okay. Anything else?
Councilor Holmes?
Thank you. Thank you. So do you know what end they will be starting at, Pleasant Street or North Attleboro?
When we were talking with the engineer before it went out to bid, the best guess is Pleasant Street, but I'll know in a couple weeks.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. If there are no other questions, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Next item. From the docket of April 2nd, 2024, I entertain a motion to transfer $40,250 from account 1124100-578300 Citywide Reserve Fund for transfer to account 1141100-530102 Assessor Appraisal Services.
Second.
Motion is in order. This is a request to hire a new contractor to help with appraisals of personal property. The expectation is that this will provide a much more consistent mechanism for assessing personal property within the city, and the expectation is that this $40,000 will be recouped in that sum. So this is an investment. Any further questions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. That concludes the business for the Finance Committee. Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion to order. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And we are adjourned at 7:58. Thank you, everyone.
The Transportation Traffic Committee will start at 7:58. So I call us to order. Attending, we have Councilor Sawyer and Vice President Dolan and myself. And we are not going to address any of the business that we have in front of us for a vote. but I would like to call Catherine Fierick forward, our Economic Development Director. It partially addresses the docket from December 5th about the study of pedestrian crosswalks, but it is a study that I was not aware of until a few weeks ago, which is going to be looking at the downtown area of the study, and I'll let you take us off. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Councilor Waterman. We received a grant at the end of last year from the Massachusetts Downtown Initiative. These are grants of services, basically. They directly pay the consultant. We receive the plan at the end of the period. That's when council usually approves these things and says, hey, we accept this gift of services to the city. So we received it specifically for a study in the downtown, because it's Mass Downtown Initiative, to look at the pedestrian experience within our economic core. We're looking specifically at comfort, accessibility, and safety. There are issues with areas where there's limited visibility of crosswalks. There are issues where individuals who are in wheelchairs or with baby strollers or rolling suitcases have difficulty making crossings. There are issues where there are too wide turning angles, and that can cause confusion on the part of pedestrians. There are also pedestrian timing signal issues. This is something that's really cheap and quick that you can fix, but typically you need a consultant to take the time to go out there and physically time when are the cars coming through, how much of a clearance period is there between different lanes of travel taking their course, when do pedestrians come in, is it every cycle, is it whenever they press a button, etc. So this study is looking at all those factors. There's going to be deliverables in the form of near-term improvements. Basically, as soon as we get the signal diagrams from them, we can implement those, make sure that we account for vehicular as well as pedestrian flows. Should be pretty easy, considering they timed our main downtown intersection, and they actually found that it was like a 20 to 30 second clearance interval, which is way above what's necessary. So the reason that everybody's waiting forever at that intersection, pedestrian and vehicle, is because of the clearance period being much longer than most intersections. So that's something immediate we can do. There are also some paint items that are really easy to take care of. So if there are parking spaces in areas where it really affects pedestrian safety and visibility, we can just take paint and remove the parking area. And then there are much larger scale improvements that will cost some capital funds to do. And they should really be incorporated into future streetscape and roadway projects. These are things like adding curb cuts where none exist right now, making sure that particularly North Main Street has added accessibility for individuals in wheelchairs. And just making sure that we're looking out for the well-being of all of our residents, regardless of ability. So this study, it's a quick one. It's supposed to take just a couple of months. The consultants did their initial site visit. Within a couple of weeks, we'll be having some stakeholder interviews. We've identified 4 target groups for stakeholder. One is infrastructure, which is DPW and planning. Another one is public safety. That's going to be our police department, our fire department, as well as Sturdy Memorial because of all the ambulance traffic. We're going to have downtown businesses come to one of the stakeholder interviews. Elected officials are going to have an opportunity to speak. The Disability Commission is going to have an opportunity to speak, as well as other community partners that address individuals with special needs. We're going to have a presentation for the public at some point thereafter. So there will be plenty of opportunity for people to weigh in. It's a quick study. It should give us some good stuff that we can do immediately and some stuff down the road. And we ought to have a final product by the end of the fiscal year.
Mm-hmm. Did that generate any questions? No? Do you have a sense of where the area is exactly, where they're going to be working?
Yeah, it's really the core of the downtown. It's on the north end, it's bounded by Sanford Street. On the southern end, it's bounded by Mill Street / Dunham. East, Pine Street, west, County. So it's a really tight area, but that's where the vast majority of our pedestrian activity in the downtown takes place anyway. The things that we're going to learn from this study are things that we absolutely can incorporate into other areas of the city, because I think that we'll learn some techniques and some best practices by doing this that are really more up to date than even 10 years ago, because this is a field where things change all the time. So hopefully we'll get some good information that we can expand throughout the city.
Okay, thank you. No more questions?
Okay.
Glad you came down. Thank
so much. Take care.
Thank you for delaying your dinner.
Yeah, take care.
And that is really all the business we have this evening. May I call for an adjournment?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned at 8:04.
Councilor Fuller?
The IT and Infrastructure Committee has no business this evening. I call for a committee hearing at the next appropriate time.
Licensing Committee also has no business for this evening, and we too will call for a committee meeting at the next appropriate time.
City, I'd like to call to order City Property and Claims Committee at 8:05. Thank you, Diana. From the docket of April 2nd, 2024, I entertain a motion to accept the generous donation of $500 in Stop and Shop gift cards and $150 in Market Basket gift cards from Rosemary Burrows to the City Veterans Service Office.
Second.
Thank you. Pretty self-explanatory, but are there any other further questions or concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that motion passes. On the docket of April 2nd, 2024, I entertain a motion to approve the generous donation of $100 in Stop and Shop gift cards from Lucille Cargill to the Veterans Services Office.
Second.
Thank you. Again, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Any questions or concerns? All those in, hearing none, all those in favor? Aye, that motion passes. That is all the business City Property and Claims Committee has this evening. I'd like to call for an adjournment at 8:06.
Second.
Thank you. We are adjourned at 8:06. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
I'd like to call Public Works to order at 8:06. I have one motion this evening. From the docket of February 20th, 2024, I entertain a motion to approve the National Grid request to locate poles, wires, and fixtures along and across the following public way. Turner Street, install 2 Joe poles on Turner Street to relocate pole A78 west of pole 177. This is to serve the pump station for the city of Attleboro.
Second. Oh, sorry.
Second. I thought I heard a second.
Does anybody have any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. And that's all the business we have. I'd like to call for an adjournment at 8:07.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, we are adjourned.
I'd like to call Public Safety and Emergency Management Committee to order at 8:07. Myself, Councilor LeBoy, and Councilor Angelo. I have one motion this evening. From the docket of April 2nd, 2024, I entertain a motion to hold a public hearing on 416 to amend Section 15-1.3 of the revised ordinance by striking the words 70 police patrolmen and replacing them with 85 police officers. The amendment section will read as follows.
Second.
Thank you. This is just to call for the public hearing. Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. I'd like to call for an adjournment.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned at 8:07. Thank you.
And I don't have anything for the Zoning and Land Use Committee. I'd like to cancel the meeting at this time, and we'll meet at the next appropriate time.
I call ordinances, elections, and legislative matters to order at 8:08. Members of this committee include myself, Councilor Holmes, and Councilor Copus. From the docket of September 19th, 2023, I entertain a motion to approve the following. Amending Chapter 11 of the revised ordinances of the City of Attleboro, Trade and Fur Products Prohibited. Chapter 11 of the revised ordinances of the City of Attleboro is hereby amended by adding a new Section 11-12 2023 as follows.
Second.
Thank you. So this proposal, which we had a public hearing on several months ago, bans the sale of fur products, something that I've been looking into for the last several weeks. Notably, it does not affect the sale of other animal-derived products, sale of raw hides. It doesn't prohibit the practice of taxidermy, and it doesn't affect, I think this is the most notable one, it doesn't affect the used sale of secondhand furs. So that was a big question that I had, and I know several others had early on. One thing that I found interesting is that 80 to 90%, I think, is the number of retail fur is sourced in China and not even in the United States. So this is something that I don't think affects us as much here in the United States in general, and really in Massachusetts specifically. But it is something that I felt like we should, reach out to the business community about. So I sat down and talked with Jack Lank at the United Regional Chamber of Commerce, just to get some thoughts of the business community. And really, as I suspected, this isn't really something that will affect any current businesses in Attleboro, and I don't think we would foresee any impact there in the near future. Currently, there's a bill in the House and in the Senate here in the legislature in Massachusetts addressing a ban on the sale of furs. And so the language of this proposal tracks pretty closely with that House bill. As of now, I believe there's 6 communities in Massachusetts that have banned fur products. So they're Wellesley, Weston, Brookline, Plymouth, Cambridge, Lexington. So you can see a trend in the types of communities that have sort of spearheaded this effort. I think generally, while the treatment of animals for the production of fur can be, quite gruesome, it does appear that the social trend is away from the production of fur products. And quite honestly, I don't think this is an ordinance that will likely result in any significant changes in Attleboro. So because of that, I personally would have no qualms about, passing this particular ordinance. But that's essentially my thoughts and my comments on this. Are there any questions, comments? Yes, Councilor Angelo.
Thank you, Councilor Tavares. This one's near and dear to my heart. I brought this one out back in September, and I appreciate you getting this taken care of and doing due diligence, and you've done a great job with the wording and everything else, so thank you for all that. I just, though we're a small little pea in the whole scheme of things for this, but I just want us to be part of the inhumane things that happen with the animals to get the fur, and I just glad that we're doing our part in making sure that this doesn't, that we're not part of that, what's going on. So thank you for taking care of this, and I'll fully support this, and hopefully everybody else will.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. That concludes the business for ordinances, elections, and legislative matters. I move to adjourn at 12.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. You're adjourned at 12. And the Special Committee on Tax Abatement Review is canceled for this evening.
Special Committee on Classification Compensation is canceled this evening. We have no new business, and look forward to the meeting at the next appropriate time.
The Special Committee on Rules and Procedures has one item, and that is a revision of the procedures governing public participation in committee of the whole sessions. I entertain a motion to delete sections 8-1.1 and 8-1.2, and to renumber section 8-1.5 as section 8-1.3 of the Attleboro Municipal Rules Procedure, the 2021 edition, and to substitute language, which I will provide to each of you. So let me first do that and ask for a second on this motion.
Second.
Second, thank you. I have observed that we don't have clear procedures for committees, or for committee of the whole sessions. And it seems to me it will be extremely useful for us to have them. It is part of a trend the school committee has recently adopted for its open public hearings, a similar revised procedure, not identical, but then their concerns are not identical. And I think it is time for us to start looking at what we have in what is now somewhat antiquated rule of public participation. So this revised procedure provides public comments are permitted. The public comment period is limited to each speaker for a period of 4 minutes. Under certain circumstances, if they need more time because they have difficulty speaking or because they need a translator, they can have up to 5 minutes. Speakers are recognized by the president. This procedure calls for speakers to identify themselves by name and place of residence. It does not call for their exact address. It calls for all speakers to conduct themselves in an orderly and peaceable manner, and provides that they cannot speak to the subject of something which has been a public hearing, whether or not, where that hearing has been closed, whether or not a decision has been reached by the council on that matter. Members of the council will not, under this procedure, discuss matters raised by speakers during the committee as a whole. Comments made during the public comment period may concern items that are not on the council's agenda, but which are nonetheless within the scope, within the jurisdiction of the municipal council. Except as provided, councilors will not interrupt speakers. The council president, however, shall have the right to terminate speech when the president, in good faith, reasonably believes any of the following 3 things. 1, that it constitutes a threat of violence or physical harm, incites imminent lawless conduct, or is not within the council's jurisdiction. Speakers may address the council in person. They may address the council remotely. And if they choose to address the council, if they need an accommodation so that they can have up to 5 minutes, they have to notify the office of the council in writing or by email at least 36 hours in advance of the scheduled meeting so that we may accommodate their needs. There will not be any extensions of the time. Finally, this procedure will take effect upon passage. I believe that this procedure is consistent with current Massachusetts law and will create a coherent, consistent procedure for all of us and for speakers to follow. So I'm open to any questions or comments. Yes, Counselor Holmes.
Thank you. Thank you for starting this process. I think this is a lot to take in. So some of the concerns are, well, first of all, there isn't the option for like remote. You actually, that's going to be expiring March 31st of this year.
Excuse me?
The state of Massachusetts, it's going to be expiring March 31st, the remote option. So the law.
I don't understand what you mean about the state of Massachusetts.
Well, you're saying that this is within line for Mass General Law, and that's actually going to be shifting March 31st.
To permit,
It's going to be expiring. It's no longer a requirement. So I think
I'm sorry, I apologize. What's no longer a requirement?
offering remote participation.
Okay, I understand. Thank you, sorry.
So I think that in light of that, we do need to take that into consideration. And I think we need to take into consideration whether we're staffed to be able to offer remote. So who is going to be managing that, what that's going to be looking like. And another concern I have is how we're going to be opening this up to other residents. So if we need to potentially have interpreters or people who have maybe challenges and needing somebody to do sign language, I feel like this needs to include that and is a bigger piece than just offering one part of it. If we're going to be making some changes here, we really need to be examining this on a bigger scale. I also have challenges with it's saying that only the president can interrupt speech, but the whole council uses Robert's rules. So that you're saying that Robert's rules don't take place for the committee of the whole. And I don't agree with that. So those are some of my initial concerns.
I have consulted with WACS. I have consulted with the Office of the Council as to whether and how long it might take to implement remote participation of the public. And I was told by everyone I asked that that was something which could be immediately implemented.
But we don't have a staff person to manage that.
It's my proposal that we ask the clerk of the council to manage it. That is to say, WACS will take care of having people able to get on the Zoom line. And then who gets called, that will be decided by the president of the council in whatever order. Speakers who are present, speakers who wish to speak remotely. It enlarges the population who can participate in our hearings. So I don't believe that technically there's a problem. That's what I've been told. And I was worried about that, and so I asked around about that, and that's what I have learned.
So you were told that the municipal council has the staff to manage this?
Yes. I mean, it doesn't require, I think is the answer, staff. It requires staff to do the timing part, limiting speakers to 4 minutes, or in certain cases, 5 minutes. But with respect to whether you participate or not, it's my understanding that what we would have is a standing Zoom, what do you call that?
Link.
Excuse me?
Link.
Yeah, that would be on the agenda for every meeting at which the public would speak. They can join, they can seek to actively participate by the mechanisms that are available to us now by Zoom.
So Clerk Jackson is going to do this?
I don't know that anything has to be done once somebody from the public decides to engage with the Zoom connection. The Zoom connection is provided, as I understand it, by WACS. You link up to that, and then if you wish to speak, you, the speaker, has to initiate the process by which you raise your hand, essentially. Unmute yourself and raise your hand. So I didn't understand that we would need more staff to arrange this. What we do need, I believe, is somebody to decide who goes first, who goes second. And that would be an integrated group. That's my understanding. May I, if I may, President Delicio, Councilor Holmes raised a couple of other questions. Can I
So what I would
address those?
Sure, but if I could just address
Sure.
the WACS piece first. We would still, to Councilor Holmes' point, we would still need someone to run that link, to be able to bring people from the public into the meeting. And that's what Virginia would be doing, and I think Councilor Holmes' point's a solid one, because there's other things, especially during a regular meeting, that Virginia's doing. So I agree with what Councilor Holmes is saying there. It's not a WACS function. They can help us set up the link.
Mm-hmm.
And Clerk Jackson wouldn't be running that. I think Clerk Jackson, if I'm understanding what you were saying earlier, is she would be the timekeeper essentially.
Yes,
and once
certainly that.
speakers got to the 4 minutes.
Yes.
Okay.
Then I stand corrected with respect to what kind of staffing it does need. If I may, before I continue with Councilor Angelo, address the other questions that were raised by Councilor Holmes. It's my, there's nothing in here which requires the council to provide interpreters or those kinds of services. The people who speak, who have issues with oral speech, or who wish to speak through an interpreter, whether a sign language interpreter or a foreign language interpreter, certainly have the opportunity to bring those people with them and have the extra time that they might need to make their presentations. So that's not an additional burden on council as I see it. The issue you raise about Robert's rules, I did not fully consider. This talks about, this procedure talks about when it's appropriate to terminate a speaker's presentation. And the judgment of the president controls with respect to whether there is a threat of violence or lawless conduct. It's also within his power, which is an important one, to determine the jurisdiction of the municipal council. So if somebody comes in and starts talking about something that's not within our jurisdiction, someone has to have the ability to shut that down. It doesn't otherwise, I think, interfere with Robert's rules. If you wish to raise a point of order, for example, I don't see that anything here interferes with that. That would be my response. Yes, Councilor Holmes.
So 8-1.1, the purpose of Committee of the Whole is to afford members of the public, other than city officials acting in an official capacity, an opportunity to address the municipal council on city business. So I'd like to make a motion to change it to an opportunity to address the municipal council, which is what we currently have, on city business. Do I have a second?
Second.
Actually, I'll second that. I'm the third in Todd's absence.
I believe that,
Point of order, where Counselor Holmes made the motion to amend, she should have the opportunity to discuss that point.
please.
So that's what it currently, the whole committee of the whole, that's why we say the statement is, if anybody would like to address the council on any city business, that's what we do currently. That's not any different than what is already happening.
That's correct. Certainly, President Biggs, yeah.
Thank you. If I could add, the way it currently states now is the purpose of the committee of the whole is to afford members of the public, other than city officials acting in official capacity, an opportunity to address the municipal council on issues of significant to or affecting the city of Attleboro. So I don't know, Diane, if you would be looking to keep that the same?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Counselor Reynolds, did you have?
That's exactly what I was gonna suggest, that we left it exactly as it used to be, as well, that it should be here. I do have a question for Counselor Holmes, if that's appropriate. Hello? I do have a...
Please.
Thank you. Counselor Holmes, when you're talking about that it's, the state is ending their remote, is ending on, in Massachusetts, 3/31. Do you believe that the other cities and towns are gonna follow suit with that? Is that really what's happening here? I know that they were talking about ending it. How does that affect all of the rest of the councils?
Well, I can forward the email, but I do think that we should take it into consideration before potentially voting on this.
So if it eliminates it, we'd be eliminating ours because we added ours per the state. That's why we added it. So if it's being eliminated by the state, I think we should follow, I personally would believe that we should do that as well and just eliminate it. We did it for a reason, and that was for COVID. And that now is over, so I have no problems with that being eliminated as well.
Counselor?
Yeah, just to Councilor Holmes as well, is having that, being that I haven't seen it, is it so it's gonna end and there's no...
Point of order, we should be talking about the amendment, comments and questions on the amendment, not the entire ordinance at this point.
Okay, so, and the amendment is to add, I just wanted to be sure that I get this correct.
It would be to keep the 8-1.1
as it currently reads. May I make a comment on the amendment?
Oh, sure, Council, it's your committee.
It does seem to me, I do understand the focus on the city of Attleboro. It does seem to me that people may have interesting things to say to us that we may not immediately understand affect the city of Attleboro, but which are of significance in the administration and the legislation for cities in Massachusetts. And I would like the opportunity to hear what everybody has to say, not limited just to focus on matters that are immediately of interest in the city of Attleboro. President Lucia.
I would have to respectfully disagree with that. Our role and our charge is squarely representing the citizens of Attleboro. I think if we open it up to state and local politics, I think you're asking for really a Pandora's box. I think that the way this is, and I would agree with Council Holmes, the way this is worded is, what committee of the whole is about is for residents to be able to come address the council about the issues that are within our scope.
I would just say within our scope is, I use jurisdiction, you use the word scope. I'm not sure that our jurisdiction is limited to, ultimately, of course, our legislation is limited to the city of Attleboro. Councilor LaVoy.
I will just echo President Delicio's statement, and I think Council Holmes is spot on with her point in that we make an effort to then have the president decide what is within the jurisdiction. But when we word it this way, I feel like we would leave it open for people to contest what he interprets within the jurisdiction of us as a whole, as a body, is removing Attleboro out of this ordinance. I mean, us removing Attleboro, we might as well remove him deciding jurisdiction as well. And that's my thoughts.
Councilor Reynolds.
So I'm going to just follow suit here. We get elected by the people in the city for city business, things within our perimeter that we are supposed to do as city councilors. So when we bring information forward, and they either read about it in the paper or they are here paying attention via what's in the paper saying that we're going to have public comments or whatever, that's what we do. That's what we get elected for. We're not opening it, or I don't believe it should be open to just anybody coming in and talking about anything that may irk them or not be in our purview. We are not here to be a sounding board for everything that someone wants or dislikes. We're here to follow our protocol, which is what we get elected to do for city things, city Attleboro business. And when we bring these things up for discussion, that is what people come to either agree or disagree on. That's what they do at the for the thing that we're discussing at that moment in time. Maybe not something that happened 30 years ago or 15 years ago. It's what we're discussing at this moment in time. And you know, this is not a 40-hour-a-week job. We cannot take on things that are not in our line of duty, let's say. So I am so opposed to changing. I'm opposed to adding or keeping it any longer than we have to, and I'm opposed to adding anything that's going to create and push us in a direction we shouldn't be going. And those are my comments.
Are there further comments? Yes, Councilor Holmes.
So people can still, when we had green communities, we had individuals from other communities come.
Excuse me, I couldn't hear you.
When we had green communities come in, like it was a state program, other communities came in to speak to us about that. That's related to the city though, and related to something that we were going to adopt. So there's an opportunity for people to come in that are from other towns and communities if they have something that they would like to tell us why we should also adopt it in Attleboro or how it could be helpful to the city, but it's still within the realm of improving something in our community. I have no idea what the point would be of I guess I'm baffled. I don't know what else we would be discussing. That concludes my comments.
Councilor Angelo.
I strongly agree with Councilor Holmes on this, and we're here, and Councilor Reynolds and Councilor LaVoy and certainly President Delisio, we're here for city business, and we have to keep it to that, or it's just going to be a free-for-all, and I think that's very important, and I couldn't agree more with what Councilor Holmes is saying.
Yes, Vice President Dolan.
So on this edition that you presented to us, was this reviewed by the solicitor?
Yes.
Okay. So, because in the solicitor's original one, number 2 says, all speakers must conduct themselves in a peaceful and orderly manner. In addition, they are encouraged but not required to do, oh, excuse me, I'm reading the wrong one. My apologies. Number 4, public speak may concern items that are not on the board or committee's agenda, but which are within the scope of the board's or the committee's authority.
Yes, and that is what I understand by jurisdiction. So there's a distinction between public hearings, which address issues that are immediately before us, motions that have been made that are subject to discussion, and the committee of the whole, which has the power to hear, as I have written it, but obviously there are serious objections to it, broader issues that people may want to raise to modify what we consider, when we consider it. So it's not identical with the conversations that happen or the presentations that happen during public hearings.
Oh, yeah, I know that.
Of course you do.
But what I'm saying is this is regarding the public speaking session
Yes,
that
right.
the solicitor was referring to, not public hearings. So it does, along with the school committee. The school committees, basically, their language is the same, of within the scope of the board or committee's authority.
So, and you understand, I'm satisfied within the scope of the city council's authority. I view that as the same as within the jurisdiction of the city council. But within the scope of the city council's authority is fine. It would also be fine, in my judgment, to, given the clear sense of the council, to leave it as it was. So, as I understand it, the motion on the floor is to leave 8-1.1 as it was. May I call for a vote on that?
Well, I think that it would be helpful to have both the delete, what you are hoping to delete and what you'd like to introduce for the next meeting as well, just so all the counselors are aware of the changes that are being made, because that was a pretty big change and it was kind of not highlighted. Usually what we do is we'll take the original and it will be red lines going through it, so every counselor can see what has been deleted and then what's been added, whereas this, if I didn't just kind of know what 8.1.1 would read, nobody would know that was even missing here. So I think that it's just kind of a more transparent way of presenting something that's very, very important for this body. And that concludes my comments.
Yes, President Delacy.
Thank you. So first of all, Council follow-up, we might be disagreeing. That doesn't undermine the great work that you've done. You've put a lot of time and effort into this. But one thing to Council Holmes' last point is I have the rules and procedures up on the laptop. I think there's an opportunity for us to kind of compare and contrast. I think we were focused on trying to bring symmetry to what the school committee has, but I think even when we're looking, we have an opportunity to clean it up from a numbering perspective, because it goes from 8-1.2 to 8-1.5.
As it currently reads, yes.
But there is no 8-1.3 or 4.
Yeah.
So I think we have that opportunity. I think some of the work that we have is already in what probably would be 8-1.4, which gives a whole list of what the rules are. What I'd be willing to take back my second on the amendment, and I think we go back to the drawing board and do some work on this and discuss again in 2 weeks.
That would be fine, and I could present to the council a red line and version of this. A little bit complicated, but I'd be happy to do it.
It's complicated, but I think it'd be worth
Yes,
it, because I think you'd be able to would have that compare and contrast.
Absolutely,
And I think
I
would
understand.
illustrate a little better what your actual intent is with this.
I understand. Yes,
So
Councilor.
I withdrew my second, so ends discussion on the amendment.
Another time.
Well, no, because now we're back to the original motion, right?
Well, then Perhaps I should withdraw my original motion to adopt this new procedure until everyone has an opportunity to look at the new procedure and compare it to the current procedures that are in the council's rules.
Diana, did you second that?
Yes, I will withdraw my second.
And that would conclude the business of the special committee on rules and procedures. At 8:44, I ask for a second on a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We are adjourned at 8:44.
And that's it.
That is a